Question 1. From the perspective of conducting a critical review of an LCA study, Istaloon, a lead auditor, receives a completed LCA report that includes goal and scope LCI and interpretation. However, he notices that the characterization models used in LCA are not justified and the weighting step was applied but not clearly described. What should Istaloon do in this situation? Accept the study as long as the interpretation phase was completed with some conclusions. B. Reject the study entirely due to non-compliance with ISO 14040-2006. C. Recommend that the practitioner justify the characterization models and provide transparent documentation of the weighting process. D. Approve the study but issue a note that weighting is optional in ISO 14044. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14044, 2006 Clause 6.1.2 requires transparency and justification of methodology choices, including characterization and weighting. While weighting is optional, ISO 14044 Clause 4.4.5, if used, its application must be clearly documented to ensure transparency and reproducibility. Istaloon's role as reviewer includes identifying inconsistencies and making recommendations for clarification, not outright rejection, unless non-conformance is severe. ISO 14040 Clause 5.3.2 emphasizes clarity in the selection of impact assessment methods. Question 2. Based on the information in an LCA audit, what is the primary reason for defining a functional unit during the goal and scope phase of an LCA? A. To minimize the time spent on inventory analysis. B. To ensure the results can be interpreted without quantitative data. C. To provide a reference for all subsequent calculations and ensure comparability. D. To allow flexibility in choosing system boundaries. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. According to ISO 14040-2006 Clause 5.2 and ISO 14044 Clause 4.2.3.1, the functional unit is fundamental as it provides a reference to which all input-output data are normalized. It ensures consistency, transparency, and comparability of LCA studies. Without it, results cannot be reliably interpreted or compared with. Meant to reduce time or introduce flexibility arbitrarily. Question 3. While examining the auditing process, Oliveira, a newly certified lead auditor, is preparing an audit plan for an LCA study of a textile manufacturing firm. The firm has outsourced data collection and modeling. What is her best course of action regarding competence and roles? A. Accept all third-party data as valid since it was provided by the client. B. Request qualifications and documentation from the third-party LCA practitioners. C. Rely solely on internal interviews with firm staff. D. Focus only on final reports and avoid reviewing data collection procedures. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14040 Clause 7.2 emphasizes that auditors must ensure competence of personnel involved in the audited system. Reviewing third-party qualifications is essential for verifying data quality and accountability, especially when data collection is outsourced. Clause 6.3.3 of ISO 14040 also mentions assessing competence as part of planning. Question 4. To what extent does the selection of system boundaries affect the reliability of an LCA study in multifunctional processes such as chemical refineries or food processing plants? A. It ensures better employee productivity. B. It helps minimize emissions reporting requirements. C. It directly influences the allocation of environmental loads and comparability of results. D. It allows companies to report partial data without justification. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4.2.3.3 mandates that system boundaries must be defined with clarity and consistency, especially in multifunctional processes. These boundaries determine how co-products are treated and significantly influence the environmental impact profile. Unclear boundaries can compromise the validity and comparability of results. Allocation procedures rely heavily on boundary definitions. Question 5. As illustrated by the following scenario, Istahalem is reviewing an LCA report for a new beverage packaging system. The report includes a detailed inventory, but Mr. Hallam notices that several assumptions regarding material sourcing and energy mix are undocumented. What should Mr. Hallam do to ensure audit quality and compliance? A. Ask the company to simply verify that the assumptions are reasonable. B. Disregard the assumptions since they are not part of the impact assessment. C. Request that all assumptions be clearly documented and justified in the final report. D. Prove the report and document his concerns in private memo. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Transparency is a core principle of ISO 14040 Clause 4 and ISO 14044 Clause 4236. All assumptions must be documented to allow reproducibility and evaluation of results. Failure to report them is a serious limitation. The auditor must ensure that assumptions do not introduce bias or reduce the credibility of the LCA. Question 6. A common misconception about normalization and weighting in LCA is that they are A. Optional but must be applied in every LCA study, B. Mandatory steps under ISO 14040 and ISO 14044, C. Optional elements that help interpret results but must be used transparently if included, D. Required for regulatory approval of environmental reports. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14044, 2006 Clause 444 and 445 make it clear that normalization and weighting are optional. However, if they are applied, the methods must be scientifically and ethically justifiable and clearly documented. They enhance interpretation but are not required. Misunderstanding this can lead to misuse of results or miscommunication to stakeholders. Question 7. The primary reason for conducting a sensitivity analysis during the interpretation phase is to A. Replace the need for a critical review, B. Test whether the study results change significantly with data variation, C. Identify functional unit inconsistencies, D. Automatically generate recommendations for policy decisions. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14044 2006 Clause 462 highlights the need for sensitivity analysis to evaluate the robustness of the LCA results by examining how variation in input data affects outcomes. It does not replace a critical review, Clause 6, but complements the interpretation phase, helping identify which inputs most influence the study. Question 8. Given the circumstances of a global food brand using LCA for packaging redesign, ISTA-NASO is tasked with ensuring that their communication of results complies with ISO principles. What must ISTA-NASO prioritize when reviewing the public LCA disclosure document? A. Shortening the report to enhance readability. B. Highlighting only the positive aspects of the new packaging. C. Ensuring transparency in methods, assumptions, and limitations. D. Providing only normalized results to external stakeholders. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. According to ISO 14044 Clause 463, any public communication of LCA results must maintain transparency and disclose methodology, assumptions, and limitations. Selective reporting or oversimplification compromises the credibility of the study and violates ISO communication principles. Reports must avoid misleading conclusions. Question 9. During the process of inventory analysis, which of the following best describes the correct approach to handling data gaps when conducting an LCI for a consumer electronics product? A. Exclude the process if the data gap is small. B. Estimate missing data based on expert opinion without documentation. C. Use best available data and document assumptions and sources transparently. D. Delay the LCA until complete primary data is obtained. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4321 and 433 require data gaps to be addressed using scientifically valid estimations where necessary and that all assumptions be documented. It is unrealistic to always have perfect data, and the ISO standard encourages reasoned approaches that support reproducibility and transparency rather than exclusion or indefinite delay. Question 10. In light of recent developments in LCA software and data automation, Camille relies heavily on software-generated outputs without validating the source of emission factors or material data. As the lead auditor, what should you do during the audit? A. Accept the software outputs if they are from a well-known tool. B. Ensure the practitioner has validated inputs and understands underlying data sources. C. Only audit the visual presentation of results. D. Ignore data validation if the interpretation appears consistent. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14044 calls for 3.2.1 and 4.5.2.1 emphasize data quality and validity. Use of software tools does not absolve the practitioner from responsibility. Auditors must ensure that the data sources, emissions factors, and calculation procedures are validated and transparent. Blind reliance on tools risks errors and non-compliance with ISO principles. Question 11. To illustrate this point, Oak is conducting a lead audit of a company's LCA report for new solar panel product. The company has included benefits from energy savings in its impact assessment phase, although these benefits occur after the use phase. Oak questions how this aligns with the defined system boundaries. What is the most appropriate action for Oak? A. Approve the report since benefits to society are always relevant. B. Request that the company redefine its system boundaries to explicitly include the post-use phase. C. Instruct the company to remove all downstream benefits from the assessment. D. Accept the benefits as valid without changes since they occur eventually. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. According to ISO 14044, 2006 calls for 2.3.3 system boundaries must encompass all relevant life cycle stages that affect the results, including energy saving benefits after the use phase is permissible only if those stages are clearly within the defined system boundaries. Without adjustment, the assessment risks inconsistency and overstatement of benefits. Question 12. From a practical standpoint, what is the rationale behind conducting a completeness check during the interpretation phase of an LCAA? To ensure all stakeholders approve the report. B. To confirm that all necessary information is available for critical review. C. To validate that all relevant phases and data of the LCA have been included and nothing critical is missing. D. To identify new environmental impact categories for future studies. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14044, 2006 clause 4.6.1 requires a completeness check to confirm that all data, stages, and relevant issues have been considered. This ensures no gaps or omissions exist that could distort conclusions. It is not about gaining stakeholder approval or identifying future research topics. Completeness is critical for robust decision-making. Question 13. Demonstrated by the case of Freitas auditing a plastic packaging LCA, she notices that the LSI data includes outdated emission factors from a national database published in 2005. The company argues these were the only values available. What should Freitas do in this scenario? A. Accept the data and recommend publishing the study with caution. B. Require the company to update the data regardless of availability. C. Evaluate the impact of using outdated data and request documentation of limitations. D. Reject the entire study for failure to use current data. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14044, 2006 calls for 2.3.6 requires data quality assessment including temporal coverage. If outdated data are used, the limitations must be clearly documented and their influence assessed. While ideal data is preferable, practical constraints are recognized. Transparency and sensitivity analysis are essential in such cases. Question 14. The most significant aspect of an auditor's responsibility during a critical review of a comparative LCA intended for public disclosure is to A. Ensure company branding is maintained throughout the report. B. Provide a ranking of alternative products. C. Confirm adherence to ISO requirements for transparency, assumptions, and value choices. D. Suggest marketing strategies based on the results. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Per ISO 14044, 2006 Clause 6.1 Comparative assertions intended to be disclosed to the public must be reviewed to ensure transparency, consistency, and lack of bias. This includes documentation of assumptions, methodologies, and value choices. Auditors are not responsible for branding or marketing. Objectivity and compliance are key. Question 15. When considering allocation procedures in multifunctional systems, which approach should be used according to ISO 14044 Hierarchy A? Economic allocation should always be the first method used. B. Physical allocation based on mass or energy must be applied in all cases. C. Wherever possible, avoid allocation by subdividing processes or expanding system boundaries. D. Use averaging methods to minimize differences. Answer. Correct answer. See explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4.3.4 prescribes a hierarchy. 1. Avoid allocation through subdivision or system expansion. 2. Apply physical relationships. 3. Apply other methods like economic allocation. The goal is to represent real causal relationships and maintain consistency across systems. Averaging methods are not recommended. Question 16. Among the various audit techniques available to assess environmental performance claims in an LCA report, which method is most effective for validating qualitative process inputs in absence of primary data? A. Estimation using industry averages without further verification. B. Interviews with operations staff and triangulation with procurement records. C. Reviewing the final summary of the LCA interpretation. D. Relying solely on secondary data from literature. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14040 2018 Clause 6.4.5 emphasizes interviewing and triangulation as a key audit technique to validate evidence. For qualitative or missing data, auditors can cross-check inputs through discussions and records like purchase logs. This improves credibility, reduces uncertainty, and aligns with data validation best practices. Question 17. While it is true that life cycle thinking aims to minimize environmental burden, which of the following best explains the concept of cradle to cradle in contrast to cradle to grave? A. Cradle to cradle focuses solely on reuse within the use phase. B. Cradle to cradle includes product disposal but ignores manufacturing. C. Cradle to cradle aims to design systems with no waste by reintegrating outputs as inputs. D. Cradle to cradle is a less comprehensive form of cradle to grave. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Cradle to cradle, as outlined in life cycle thinking principles, builds on circular economy concepts. Materials are reused or regenerated instead of disposed. This contrasts with cradle to grave, which ends at disposal. ISO 14040 supports cradle to cradle for sustainability-focused LCA by encouraging closed-loop system designs. Question 18. In response to a recent audit, Mr. Dias observes that the LCA report includes only midpoint indicators such as WLO's warming potential without any endpoint or damage assessment. Is this approach compliant with ISO 14044, and what should Mr. Dias do? A. Mark the study incomplete and request endpoint analysis. B. Prove the study as midpoint indicators are sufficient and commonly used. C. Require the addition of water footprint as a supplemental indicator. D. Insist that normalization be conducted in all cases. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4.4.2 allows flexibility in the level of detail and type of indicators, including the use of midpoint indicators. While endpoint or damage assessments offer more interpretation, they are not mandatory. Midpoint indicators at W are a standard practice and widely accepted for May LCA goals. Question 19. By evaluating the LCA interpretation section, the lead auditor must assess the sensitivity analysis. What should be the primary focus during this review? A. Confirm that small changes in key data do not significantly affect conclusions. B. Ensure the report includes all optional impact categories. C. Determine if the company conducted a peer review of their software. D. Assess whether the visual presentation of results is user-friendly. Answer. Correct answer A. Explanation. Sensitivity analysis ISO 14044 Clause 4.6 2. Assesses how variations in input affect results. The auditor must verify whether critical conclusions remain stable when key assumptions or data inputs are changed. This is central to determining the robustness and reliability of the LCA fundings. Question 20. As evidenced by current auditing trends, the use of risk-based approaches in LCA auditing helps auditors A. Eliminate uncertainty from all data, B. Focus on processes and decisions that most significantly affect outcomes, C. Simplify the audit process by skipping low-risk areas, D. Make auditing faster without affecting quality. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Risk-based auditing, aligned with ISO 14040 Clause 5.4, enables auditors to prioritize high-impact areas that affect the validity of the LCA. It doesn't eliminate uncertainty but optimizes audit focus, enhances effectiveness, and improves resource allocation. It is not meant for simplification or shortcutting audit stages. Question 21. While examining an LCA study submitted by a manufacturer of electric buses, Novak, a lead auditor, notices that the functional unit is inconsistently defined. The inventory phase is based on per kilometers traveled, while the impact assessment is calculated per vehicle lifetime. What should Novak's next step be? A. Recommend discarding the study due to inconsistency in boundaries. B. Request the practitioner to align all phases with consistent functional unit. C. Ignore the discrepancy as long as the conclusions appear valid. D. Approve the report and suggest better formatting in future reports. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. A consistent functional unit is critical to LCA comparability and validity. ISO 14044 2006 Clause 4231. Inconsistencies across phases can lead to misleading conclusions. The lead auditor must ensure that all LCA phases reference the same functional unit, or at minimum provide justified conversions to maintain comparability and transparency. Question 22. In a modern context of applying LCA in procurement decisions, why is defining system boundaries especially critical in comparing local versus imported products? A. It ensures supply chain logistics are confidential. B. It allows emissions from transportation to be excluded. C. It determines whether impacts from distribution and use phases are included. D. It ensures brand visibility is maintained in the report. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Defining system boundaries. ISO 14044 Clause 4233 is essential for fair and meaningful comparisons. Omitting transportation or downstream impacts can skew results, especially in global supply chains. For procurement, such omissions could favor imported goods without reflecting the full environmental cost, undermining sustainable decision-making. Question 23. During the process of evaluating documentation, Mr. Baum, a lead auditor, discovers that the LCA report includes an allocation based purely on the number of employees in each department. Which of the following best reflects the auditor's response? A. Accept the allocation as creative solution. B. Recommend use of economic or physical allocation instead per ISO guidelines. C. Insist that no allocation be performed at all. D. Approve only if the employee ratio reflects environmental impact contributions. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14044 2006 Clause 4.3.4 discourages arbitrary allocation. Employee count is not a recognized basis unless it correlates with actual input-output contributions. Preferred approaches include process subdivision, physical causality, or economic value. Using HR metrics lacks scientific validity unless justified with evidence. Question 24. To better understand how to apply ISO 14040 in multi-site LCAS, what must auditors keep in mind when assessing data quality across diverse production locations? A. Site-specific data must be identical across locations to ensure fairness. B. Only one site's data is needed if it's the largest. C. Site-specific variations should be documented and representativeness evaluated. D. All secondary data must be replaced with site-specific values. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4236 requires representativeness, completeness, and consistency in data quality. Multi-site LCAS must document site-specific differences and evaluate how representative each dataset is. Blind averaging or using only one site undermines reliability and violates the principles of transparency and scientific accuracy. Question 25. Contrary to popular belief, what is the main role of normalization in LCA according to ISO standards? A. To remove irrelevant impact categories from results. B. To convert absolute impact values into dimensionless quantities relative to a reference. C. To summarize all environmental impacts into one number. D. To adjust impact categories based on social preferences. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 444 defines normalization as the optional step of expressing results relative to a reference value, e.g. regional per capita impacts. This allows for contextual understanding of potential impacts, but is not a tool for summarizing or excluding categories. It improves interpretability, not reduces scientific objectivity. Question 26. Illustrated by the case of Ortega Auditing, a metal recycling firm, she notices that the LCA study omits upstream impacts from electricity production, claiming renewable electricity was used. How should she address this omission? A. Accept the exclusion as renewable energy has no environmental impact. B. Require inclusion of upstream impacts with justification and appropriate data. C. Prove the study assuming carbon neutrality. D. Suggest that the company explain the omission in footnote only. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 4321 mandates that all relevant inputs, including upstream processes like energy production, must be accounted for unless explicitly excluded with justification. Renewable energy still has impacts, e.g. land use equipment manufacture. Omitting them violates completeness and transparency principles. Question 27. During a review of a comparative LCA study between two detergent products, what is the most critical factor an auditor must assess before public disclosure? A. Whether both products have the same price. B. Whether the products are owned by the same company. C. Whether assumptions, system boundaries, and data quality are consistent across both products. D. Whether the results show one product is clearly better. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 5.3 requires strict consistency in methodology when conducting comparative assertions intended for public disclosure. The functional unit, system boundaries, data sources, and assumptions must be aligned for both products. Otherwise, the comparison is invalid and could mislead stakeholders or consumers. Question 20. Through careful analysis of an LCA audit report, Yamada realizes that impact assessment results include only climate change and water use, omitting acidification and eutrophication without explanation. What is the appropriate response? A. Approve the report if the client prefers simplified outputs. B. Request justification for excluding standard impact categories. C. Remove climate change results to balance the report. D. Add impact categories manually using standard factors. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 441 requires justification for selection or exclusion of impact categories. While not all categories are mandatory, exclusions must be clearly documented to maintain transparency and allow readers to understand limitations. Selective omission without explanation violates good LCA practice. Question 29. In summary of a critical review process, what is the auditor's primary responsibility when conducting panel review for complex LCA study submitted for an ecolabel application? A. Simplify technical language for public understanding. B. Act as the company's representative to answer questions. C. Ensure the panel includes multidisciplinary expertise and that the process is well documented. D. Present the final decision to the regulatory authority. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14044 Clause 6.2 3 outlines the structure of panel reviews for LCA studies intended for public or comparative purposes. The lead auditor must coordinate an independent multidisciplinary team, oversee the documentation of review comments, and ensure methodological integrity, but does not act as a spokesperson for the client. Question 30. When faced with significant data uncertainty in a waste management LCA, how can an auditor evaluate the robustness of the study? A. Require all data to be converted into primary measurements. B. Approve the study if the overall conclusion aligns with policy goals. C. Review the sensitivity and uncertainty analysis for key variables and assumptions. D. Focus only on comparing impact category totals. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. ISO 14044 clause 462 and 463 stress the importance of sensitivity and uncertainty analyses as tools for assessing robustness. These allow auditors to determine if results are stable across different scenarios or assumptions. Total scores without context or scrutiny of variable sensitivity do not reflect scientific soundness.